Dr. Miller here with another Journal Club 35 we're up to. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and check out the other 34. Book reviews as well, some videos on training, sets and rep schemes, nutrition videos, all kinds of stuff in field exercise sports science. I hope you're finding the videos valuable. Well, maybe if this is the first time watching, hopefully you do. If you've been watching, I guess you are because you're still watching. You're more welcome to wait to like this video, see if you actually like it first. Watch it or listen to it, whatever you're doing. And be a part of the ever-growing group of people as we go to 1,000 subs. I'm at 205 right now at the time of this video. I want to get to 1,000. Probably most are for ego, but I enjoy making these videos. So hopefully they get out there, and again, the people that are watching them, you are finding them valuable and using them in training or coaching people or just FYI. All right, so what do we have here? Our Journal Club is called Training, Supplementation, and Pharmacological Practices of Competitive Male Bodybuilders Across Training Phases. So this is a survey study. This is by Hackett, published in 2022, Journal of Strength Conditioning Research. A survey study looking at bodybuilders and their practices. This doesn't, survey studies are just that. You're looking at, okay, what are people doing? I don't put a lot of weight in these at times, but I think they're interesting. I still read them. Like it could be like, what are the prevailing attitudes of strength conditioning coaches, or what are the current approaches to training of strength conditioning coaches and soccer players, or whatever. It's interesting to see what people are doing. Think about it. Obviously, it doesn't mean everybody's doing whatever's in this, the respondents to this. I'm going to give you the percentages, like 50% do this, right? It doesn't mean they're right. Those people that are in the majority. There's a lot of individual differences here. There's some people that are on the gas in here, that are on anabolic steroids. And it profiles them. So there's some things going on here, but still interesting. So if you're interested in hypertrophy and hypertrophy muscle gain, right? And you're not a bodybuilder. I'm not into bodybuilding. I don't train bodybuilders specifically or anything like that. But I think looking at the bodybuilding practices is kind of like asking a sprint coach, how do you run faster? Even though you're not a sprinter, you're like, well, I'd like to learn how to run faster. Well, here's some techniques for you. If you want to gain muscle mass, this could be very helpful. Okay. At least give you some context for what the prevailing idea is among at least these bodybuilders. So what we had here was 26-year-old male bodybuilders, on average 26-year-old male bodybuilders. Was not their first competition. They had average competition of 3, 1 to 5 was the range there. Again, not including the first one. The first one didn't count. 235 respondents, 165 competed in what was called natural bodybuilding competitions. And then a pretty wide range of how long it's been since they competed. So from 68 to 626 days since their last competition, the average was 303. So 26-year-olds had enough time to compete, right? They had to be at least over 18 and not in their first competition. Okay, so what's the breakdown here? Well, the author broke it down, the different competitive seasons, if you will, cycles. It would be off-season, which was 20 to 30 weeks out, and then pre-competition, which was 20 to 30 weeks in to a competition. So you can see how maybe the training changed. The general overview here was that most respondents, 85.5, used split routines with a training frequency. About half the people did 4 to 5 sessions, and the other half did 6 to 7 sessions ish, right? So 45 sessions was 47.2%, 67 sessions was 48.5%. But most of all of them use splits. Your typical large muscle mass exercise, groups, if you want to think of it that way, is like hamstrings is what I'm getting at, gluteal muscles. So like a collection of muscles, right? Train twice a week. About 60% of the people did that. 10 to 20% trained 3 times a week. And in terms of the smaller muscle groups, 50% were trained twice a week, and 20% trained 3 times a week. Abdominals, once a week was 31%, or twice 34%. So, all right, so what's all this mean? Split routines were the most popular. There was kind of a 4 to 5 and 6 to 7 were the most popular training frequencies. Most muscle groups are trained twice a week by the majority of the respondents. Some trained them more than twice a week. So that could be, more of a whole body approach then. Or if like you train triceps, you might train in overhead pressing and horizontal pressing. Both get triceps in that particular example. Okay. All right. So that's kind of the general. I think that follows what we kind of already think about with resistance training and hypertrophy. Okay, is roughly 3 to 4 sessions. Split routines sometimes effective. I do whole body routines typically. However, I think what you'll see is the more trained somebody is, and the one thing I want to really point out with this survey I thought was interesting, the more trained somebody is, the more volume obviously is going to be needed, the more stimulus is going to be needed, and that can be hard to pack that in during a week, even on a whole body routine. Because if you're always hitting a certain body part over and over again at a high volume, like I'll do upper back, some sort of pulling almost every exercise, every training day. But if the volume gets really high, it's going to be hard to train the upper back every single day at that volume needed, okay, in order to be able to recover. So anyway, all right, so let's look at this off-season phase. Remember, this is 20 to 30 weeks out. So this is the trends that are going to emerge. Okay, I'm not going to read every single percentage to you because that's going to get boring. But over half of the individuals reported training 2 to 3 muscle groups each training session, with 20% even more muscle groups, so 4 to 5 up to 6 plus. Over 60% did 2 to 3 exercises per muscle group for 3 to 4 sets. So 73% did 3 to 4 sets. So here's the big picture. If we're thinking about the majority here, 2 to 3 muscle groups per session, 2 to 3 exercises per muscle group, 3 to 4 sets per exercise. Okay, so if we expand it all the way out, let's say one muscle group is trained. Let's say we did 3 exercises, and then let's say all the way up to 4 sets. That'd be 12 sets. Okay, 12 sets for one muscle group. So a total on the high end would be about 36 sets in a session over the 2 to 3 muscle groups. Again, that was if we did 3 muscle groups. I got maxed everything out. 3 muscle groups, 3 exercises per muscle group, 4 sets. Okay, what I thought was interesting here, though, was the 3 to 4 sets. Okay, 3 to 4 sets per exercise. So I tend to cap things off at 5 sets. I've done it at 6 a few times, but for one exercise, once you get over 4 sets, there's some staleness that can occur, even if it's just psychologically. You get bored with doing the exercise for more than that. So I thought this was interesting, and this kind of plays into one of my biases when it comes to training, is I think exercise variety is really important. There's a couple studies that support that as well. Maybe I think I've done one journal club with one of them. If not, I'll dig it out and maybe do it. But essentially, that rotating exercise is really important. Now, obviously, rotating exercises, if you're a newbie, is going to be slower, right? You need to learn how to master the movement first in order to, and then see some progress in that. It's like some strength gains. It might be 8 weeks before you rotate an exercise. But if you're a newbie, you're only doing 2 to 3 sets anyway. But if you start to get up to the point where you're doing 5 sets of an exercise, it might be time to add another exercise. This also plays into like the 1x20 training. Like Dorian Yates to do stuff like this, right? The HIIT training, not HIIT, and more of the intervals type stuff, but HIT, high intensity training to failure, right? Reps to failure. By the way, these reps were to failure, okay, when I profile those. So keep it, or at least they're RM, okay? So I thought that was interesting, right? Is that more exercise, I mean, that was one of the biggest things out of this study, the way I want to talk about it, is more exercises were used rather than just ramping up the number of sets per exercise. We chopped up that volume into other exercises, especially when it gets into, quite a few sets. That's a good idea to stay engaged with the program. All right, in this off-season phase, another interesting thing was that more of the 40% of respondents reported working in the 7 to 9 reps per set range, and then 31% at 10 to 12. Now that will change. That will change when we move from the off season to the pre-competitive phase. Actually, the reps per set go up, and the typical rest periods were 60 to 120 seconds, so roughly 2 minutes. Some are taking a little bit longer. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with the exercise, right? So some being 31%. So I think your generic 60 to 1 minute to 3 minutes rest is about a good range here. Okay, and that this kind of followed that. Aerobic exercise performed 58% of the respondents. The respondents 43% performed 3 to 4 sessions per week. So we'll see that changes too. Is that right now in this off season there was not a lot of cardiovascular training as compared to the pre-competition phase. Okay, all right. So let's look ahead here. And sorry, let me turn that off. I was trying to sell me something. All right. Well, during this phase, there also was the usage of quote-unquote advanced methods, and these were simply supersets. A majority of the individuals did supersets. There was some that did negatives at 48%. People did pyramid sets, so building up the load, right? Load pyramid, getting heavier. Partial reps, 37%. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. most of these, it looks like, were used in single joint, was 64%. Now, I doubt very much the pyramids were, right? But the supersets, things like that, is probably where you're seeing that high percentage is individuals using, using these techniques. 37% were using multiple joint exercises. So again, I'm thinking this is probably a pyramid, right? So again, this is where the survey isn't perfect, but no survey is. 31% did something on the last set, right? Some sort of finisher. And then 31% did something at the end of a session. So, I don't know if like myo reps were included in this, but I'm thinking like, that could be a finisher like for calves or something like that. Where you did these, or negatives maybe were the finisher or whatever it might be. All right. So in terms of these quote unquote advanced techniques, they were used, 85% people were using these individuals. And I imagine the superset was the predominant way that, 85% was the superset, excuse me. And that, again, of all the advanced techniques, that was the most predominant one. Okay. So, I was surprised so many people were using partials, to be honest with you. I do think partials, and this is, I know, controversial. I think partials can be valuable. But the word advanced here fits the mold. Same with, negatives and, pyramids, all this stuff. You don't use those things until you need them. If you can get away with doing 3 sets of 10 and see gains, then do 3 sets of 10. Who cares? Sometimes we like to do the fancy stuff when we don't need it. All right. Okay. 66% reported periodizing their program. Block periodization was performed 69%. There was 20% performed undulating periodization. So a block is kind of the traditional, sets, reps go up, load comes down, right? And you do that over the course of weeks. Resist training volume increased through the training cycles was emphasized by 20% of respondents. There were 20% of respondents who also reported performing deloading weeks. Okay. I was surprised that, so this says resistance training volume increases throughout the training cycles is emphasized by only 20%. I thought that was interesting. You would think volume should be increasing. If you watch my last journal club, 20% increase was hypothesized as being a good one. By the way, this, if you factor out the number of sets in this, by the way, that these individuals are doing per muscle group, it's around 24 sets. And that study did 22 sets. So, that 22 to 24 sets per muscle group seems to be a pretty good range that at least individuals are using and the research literature supports. Now, again, you might need more if you need to see gains, and that's why I was surprised that progression wasn't a big part of what was going on here. Now, it doesn't mean they're not doing it. Maybe they didn't understand, they couldn't define progression in the survey properly. So the individual said, nah, that's not something that's really important to me. I don't know. But I thought that was interesting. All right, moving to the pre-competition phase. The number of muscle groups targeted now was under 3. Okay. So I'll cap the trend here in a second. And then aerobic exercise was coming up. 89.8% did aerobic training. 57% of those individuals did over 5 sessions per week of aerobic training, roughly 31 minutes. That was 40% of the people doing 31 minutes. Walking at 76% was the highest. The mode of aerobic training was the highest. Big picture here then. Aerobic training comes up in pre-competition phase, more fat loss because it's lower intensity. Okay, so if you're just generally if you're training just for muscle, you're not a bodybuilder, roughly 20 to 30 minutes is what I prescribe typically, roughly 20 to 30 minutes of aerobic training. You could have a calorie goal depending on how big you are. But low intensity walking is fantastic. It doesn't take it out of your legs. You could do incline walking, right, on a treadmill, or if you have some hills in your neighborhood or something. Walking is a fantastic activity. It's great for the back. It's not hard on the knees as compared to running, and you're not going to get the fatigue associated with some of these other modes of training. Cycling was another one at 40%. I agree with that. It was a good one. Okay, jogging was only at 21%ish. It should be 0 in my opinion, but. Anyway, I hate jogging. See my video on that, by the way, why I'm anti-jog. All right. So more aerobic when these individuals are trying to train. And the reps per set, I mentioned before, there was a shift towards higher rep sets at 10 to 12 reps. Right? So if you remember before, in the off season was 7 to 9, and now the reps come. This looks a lot like reverse periodization, right? So block periodized for like strength, or an athlete would be, high volume, low intensity, and then over time, like a block would just linear, classical, whatever you want to call it. Over time, they'll start to change. The intensity will come up. You start lifting heavier stuff. You want to work on strength, and the volume will come down as a result of lifting heavier stuff. This kind of sheds light on reverse periodization, wherein you lift heavier stuff first with lower volumes, and then over time, the intensity is going to come down and the volume is going to come up. And that makes sense for preserving lean mass, burning more calories, right? And maybe building lean mass, of course, and then adding aerobic training at a higher frequency on top of that. You're going to see more body fat loss, better body composition changes over time. The author did ask about drug use, so enhanced athletes. So performance-enhancing drugs were used by 53.6% of respondents competing in bodybuilding competitions not sanctioned as natural. So that's 37, and then it's 69 respondents. 37, yeah. 2.5% of the respondents who competed in natural bodybuilding competitions. Okay, so basically they're just profiling these individuals. Have a list of drugs. I'm not going to read all these, but they have a list of drugs that these athletes, quote-unquote athletes, were taking. The average amount, or the median, excuse me, not the average. The median amount of number of drugs that was taken is 6. That's a lot of drugs. Again, some of these are to counteract the effect of the drug, and so on and so forth. So they have a list of basically a whole bunch of anabolic steroids, primarily. In terms of dietary supplements, 95.7 used a supplement of some sort. Okay? A median of 5 supplements per person. Most common were, of course, creatine monohydrate at 80. Whey protein was 65. I thought that was interestingly low. Casein was 26. Multivitamins at 31. Fish oil 26. And pre-workout supplements 25. Caffeine was at 20. There were some other supplements introduced during the pre-competition, like fat burners at 30%, roughly 27.6 caffeine, and some others. So, bottom line there, creatine is used quite a bit. Almost everybody used creatine, and whey protein was a lot lower than I thought it'd be. So I don't know if they're maybe taking another protein source or just not taking it, but it was only at 65%. All right, this was during the pre-competitive phase, by the way. And that really didn't change from the off season from what I read into this study here. Now I'm looking closer at the study because it also broke down kind of these general movement patterns, like what the percentage of the respondents that did, for example, dumbbell ladder raises, and that's like 90%, right? Dumbbell press was like 80%. I'm just picking up the high ones here. Lat pull down was 90%. Cable row was 75%. Barbell row, I'm talking about horizontal pulling. I should have profiled this. So horizontal pulling, barbell row, lat pull down, and cable row in terms of back were the most popular. In the shoulders, it was dumbbell lateral raises, dumbbell press, and I'm looking for any score here that's over 70%. Ish. I'm trying to pick off the really high ones, and so these are all probably more like 70 plus. Some of them are 80. Like I mentioned, lateral raises looks like it was like 95% almost. In the chest, it was dumbbell incline bench, which was almost 80. Flat bench was 80. Those are the most common, and then cable crossover for the chest was around 75%. Abdominals, leg raises was around 70%. It's the highest by far, and then arms, triceps push down, triceps extension, of course, over 80%. Dumbbell curls, again, that could be a lot of different curls, but 85%. Cable curls and barbell curls were about 80%. And then finally, legs, you can imagine there's a pretty big spread. Over 70% would be stiff-legged deadlifts, seated calf raise, standing calf raise, leg press, leg extensions, leg curl. Leg curl is almost 100%. Again, high in the 90s. Let's see, barbell hack squat, or back squat. There's a hack squat too. Back squat was at 85%. Okay, I know that's a lot of percentages, but not a whole lot there. Like, that isn't new. But I think it's just interesting. This was in the off-season phase, by the way. These type of exercises that were being performed. Your typical exercises, all right? Your typical exercises. Okay, so all these percentages, blah, 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 put together, and I've kind of summed this up as I went along as well. But what does this all mean? Okay. Again, reverse periodization appears to be a part, at least of what these bodybuilders were doing. Again, you're talking about a variety of lifters, so who knows what somebody could have been doing, something extreme or something like that. But the number of the focus became over time is less exercises, higher rep sets, split routines were used commonly. You're looking at roughly 24 sets per muscle group. On average, how's that in this group? And it's hard with these surveys. That's why I'm kind of stuttering around. Is you have these percentages, right? Like if there's 60% doing, there's 40% not. So they're doing something else. So this is just a general view. Okay, train each body part twice a week. If you really want to see composition changes, do cardiovascular training at low intensities, as you have that mid-range repetition per set. At 10 to 12. Maybe you could dip down to 7 to 9 occasionally, but there were individuals doing singles and stuff like that, but the percentages I think were under 20% doing things like that. And again, it's hard to tease out when they were doing that, what exercises specifically. Supersets are very popular. Not surprising, I use them as well when I train people. Negatives and pyramids, about 30% were using these other type of methods. And so, something that you could try as an advanced technique if you're somebody who needs more, I feel like you need more stimulation. Right, the muscle needs something different. Now, keep in mind, and I've mentioned this before in a few videos, I believe a lot of these advanced techniques are also just things to be engaged with mentally, like I feel like I'm involved with my program, not getting stale and lifting. So those are some valuable things as well. There's some other things I could talk about in here, but those were the highlights. I hope you found this valuable. Went through the survey. I thought it was interesting. Less exercises over time. I think you can modulate this right over time in your own training, even if you're not a bodybuilder. So you could have, this is nothing new either, but have a couple cycles where you lift a little heavier, and then have a couple cycles where you scale up the reps per set. When you're looking at the number of exercises per muscle group, that could vary depending on the reps per set as well. But like 3 to 4 sets of an exercise, 2 to 3 exercises per muscle group. That's a great range. If you find that you're just if you're just starting out, you don't need to do that many. You could do 1 exercise per muscle group for 3 sets, and that 10 to 12. So again, you got to use some common sense here. If you don't need if you don't need that kind of stimulation, if you don't need that kind of stimulus, then I should say stimulus. Then you don't need to take that volume on. But as you want to see gains over time, you need to increase the volume. If you're happy in maintenance, then just stay with what you have, and that's what you'll get. You'll get maintenance. But over time, you might want to go back and forth between heavier loads and lighter loads. Less reps per set, more reps per set, more focus on specific body parts. And I know this has been talked about in many circles, like maybe body parts that you see need help, right, compared to the others. So like if your arms are underdeveloped, maybe you spend more of your training volume on your arms and put some of the other body regions into maintenance for a cycle or something like that. All right, I'll stop rambling. Interesting survey. Doesn't mean you should follow these things, but I think it gives you a snapshot of what others are doing, and maybe you find that helpful. See you in the next video.